up rendering by reducing the CPU workload. At least in theory, this results in fewer polygons and renders better rounded objects. So you could actually make things with squares instead of just a bunch of triangles everywhere. And at the time, with a lot lower speeds of CPUs and memory clocks and all that stuff, it made sense to use squares instead of triangles, at least in some situations, to get better rounded objects or models in your game, because triangles, you had more processing power required. Now, as memory got better and better, this made little sense, and it also kind of made little sense at the time, because this meant that there was no support for OpenGL. They didn't even want to include it. I read a statement by NVIDIA and SGS Thompson saying that they didn't think consumers would need OpenGL at all, so they just didn't bother with it. And then by the time Direct3D came along and DirectX, this couldn't do that either, because it didn't support rendering through quads, only through traditional triangles and those types of polygons. They did release a driver or a patch for it to update it to run DirectX, but only through software. So you're effectively running a hardware accelerator in software mode to run hardware accelerated DirectX, Direct3D stuff. It made no sense, and it was one of the many reasons this thing went down. And there were some other reasons it just never caught on. One was the price. You know, you have all of these integrated components in there, making it more expensive. And a lot of people already had a bunch of expensive components in their computers that this meant to replace. Maybe this would make more sense if your computer just didn't have, you know, a sound card or a game board or a decent video card. But if you had this stuff, especially for DOS, then this thing made very little sense. Because if you had, say, a card by Roland for sound, and maybe even a card by S3, or with an S3 chip for video, or, you know, Sing Labs or anything like that, especially for DOS, and DOS is a big deal at the time, then this just didn't match up. I mean, if you compare, say, the sound quality of the general MIDI output of this thing versus something like a nicer Roland card, it's no comparison. Inside the box, you get some lovely documentation here, starting with the user's guide. It's a guide for users, as you might expect. Well, users of the Diamond Edge 3D, not other types of users, whatever I'm talking about. Yeah, Diamond did not deal in those people. But yeah, this is just to basically describe how to install the card and set it up, and some other things as far as drivers and whatnot. It's pretty standard as far as like how you'd install another video card. The only thing that's really different is installing the little edge connectors to the board to actually plug in the Sega Saturn controllers. Otherwise, it's pretty basic stuff, but we will get to showing that here in a moment. And of course, it also came with the CD portfolio. Pretty self-explanatory. It is a folio port for CDs. And it also comes with a couple basic instruction manuals for some of the games, although calling them instruction manuals, a bit of a misnomer. It's this like most basic installation tips in both Japanese and English, and that's it. No actual manuals here, just for installation. So otherwise, all you get are the games themselves. And this is really where all the good stuff is. So we've got NASCAR Racing by Papyrus. This is a version specifically for the Diamond Edge 3D and compatible cards. A version of Panzer Dragoon, not for resale. And Virtua Fighter Remix, also a special edition for this. And you also have the Diamond Edge drivers version 1.0 here. Though, like I mentioned earlier, there were other driver versions available later. We're probably just going to be looking at 1.0 here since, well, that's what I have, and we'll just be taking a look at it in its original form, because why not? Now let's get to the actual hardware, and there is a bit more going on here than your typical video card of the time, or even of now. Not so atypical, though, is the card itself. This is just your standard, like, PCI card. Not anything too weird going on here, except that it is not just a video card. As mentioned earlier, it is also a sound card. So we have sound card inputs and outputs on the back here, in addition to the normal VGA output. And there's also this little deal here, which may look like an Ethernet jack, and in fact, I think it is the same basic deal, but it is actually for the game port to allow you to plug in normal 15-pin PC joysticks. You have a little dongle sticking out the back of your computer, in addition to plugging in the end of your joystick. So not exactly the most appealing thing ever, but I guess it beats making it like twice as tall, or yeah, I don't know. They just kind of had to do it because of the sound card ports, obviously. Now, the other thing that is really kind of interesting with this is the fact that you can plug in